Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing the train tag. So this is a new tag created especially by Alan from Alan Reads for the March on the Rails readathon, reading events, reading challenge, in which we read books related to trains. Now it is 1 week until the start of April, but I'm gonna get this out tonight, which gives you 6 days to pick up a book on trains. I sort of forgot to add this one to my March list, and I really did want to. This event is hosted by Alan's Reads, Debs at Raina Reads Stuff, who else? Greg at Ghost Readers in the Sky, and Andreea at Infinite Text. I think that's it. So Debs tagged me in this, and that reminded me about the event. I was like, oh, I didn't add anything. But I do have, okay, I don't know if this is cheating, but I do have the little engine that could, which is probably like 12 pages, on my preschool, list for that whole preschool thing that I'm doing. And so I'm definitely at least going to read this in the next week if I don't pick up anything else on trains. But I'm going to do this fun tag. So there are 8 questions on this one. The answers don't have to be about trains, but it's just kind of like extra credit if they are. I think only my first one probably is about trains. Okay, so the first prompt is the Great Railway Bazaar. Talk about a book featuring an epic journey. Okay, so my favorite epic journey ever is Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. I love this book so much. And this book does feature trains and other forms of transportation, but one of my favorite parts of this book does feature a train, and that is when they are coming through like the Utah, Wyoming area, and they stop at Green River, Wyoming. All right, and they go through there. It talks about the railroad station there. And I always love that part because I know that place. I've gone through Green River lots of times because we live in Arkansas and our family lives in Oregon and Idaho. And so that drive, we go right through Green River every time. And there is a great big train depot exchange. I don't know what, but it has a really cool Victorian building and tons of train tracks. And I just love standing there and just imagining Phileas and company on the train and stopping there at Green River and the whole thing. So anyway, love this book, Around the World in 80 Days. There are spin-offs, like I can make a whole video. In fact, I'm going to make a whole video on this book and how it relates to Nellie Bly, who went in undercover in a madhouse in the Victorian times. I think there's a whole story, a whole thing. I'm going to make a video. Just got super inspired. Anyway, so another thing that I found when I was on the shelf grabbing that book is this, also by Jules Verne, called Tour of the World. Now, if that doesn't sound like an early version of Around the World in 80 Days, this was published in New York. It doesn't have a date. It says Tour of the World in 80 Days. And I'm so curious if it is an early copy, an early version, if it's the same story, or what. So I'm gonna take the time to look into that too. All right, number 2, Brief Encounter. A brief or short book you could read while waiting for a train. So I actually have not waited for a train long enough to read an entire book of any specific length, because when I travel in places with trains, which would actually only be England ever, I'm usually really good about like timing my stuff and making the most of every last second, right? So I usually get there and I'm like, I might have a little while to wait, but not usually very long. And so when I do, I like to have something that is like something I could read that I don't really have to focus on because I get super distracted by people watching. I am totally a people watcher. So I picked out this. This is Book Love by Debbie Tung, and it is a graphic novel all about bookish experiences. So this would be a good one, I think, for reading at a train station because it is short, but it also is something that you can just like, you don't have to follow a story, right? You're just reading little comics. It's full of just comics. It's not even a graphic novel. It's like a graphic comic book. Like every page is a different comic. But then I thought I would show you the last book that I did read on a train, and that was Georgette Hare's Arabella. So when I was in England in June, I was reading Arabella, and so that is what I read on most of the trains, and most of the time. I thought I might even have a train ticket stuck in here, but it doesn't look like it. So anyway, that's the last book I read on a train. I'm adding to these question prompts, obviously. All right, number 3, Bradshaw's Guide. Now, these are done by, I believe, Alan is in England. So some of these we don't know here in the U.S. what this means, but if you do. Number 3, Bradshaw's Guide. Don't know. A guidebook to a favorite place or thing. Okay, so a couple of my favorites. The first one I can't find. I think one of my little darlings has borrowed it, which is actually just fine, but it's this guidebook from Winchester Cathedral about William Walker. He was a guy who basically saved the cathedral with his bare hands. So the cathedral was like sinking and just like, it was the structural, right? Major structural issues. And so what they did was they there's just a ton of water underneath because of what they built it on and just time and, stuff. So he took like these huge like sandbags maybe, and he swam. He was a diver. He went under the cathedral through this dark space way back and started packing in all of these, I believe they were sandbags. And then he'd swim back up again and grab another one and pack them all in there with this like massive cathedral on top of him that was sinking into the earth by the minute, and got it all packed in there and ended up saving the cathedral. So this is the guidebook, but I would definitely look him up if you are interested in the story, get the full story. It's one of my favorite stories when we go to Winchester Cathedral to just hear over and over again from the guides, because they all have a different way of telling it, right? But they have like this like bronze bust of him and just this whole thing to commemorate a super brave guy. And then another one that I love is actually also from Winchester Cathedral, and this is the Misericords sort of guidebook, information book. And if you were watching that video that I made there in June or July, I can't remember whichever one, when I went to Winchester Cathedral, I made one showing you guys some of these. These are the wooden etchings that are on like the choir stalls, like the seat. So when you flip the seat up, these little etchings are underneath. And at Winchester Cathedral and in many other cathedrals, they have these, and they're just unique. Not a lot of, like, I've never seen like a duplicate. Some of them are kind of weird. Like this is a like squatting woman. This one in the middle here, it's a man and a woman with linked arms. The bottom one is an ape bringing forward a blinking owl. It says. So it's just kind of very interesting, creative. Some of them have their tongues sticking out. Some of them are just in very silly poses. But they are in these choir stalls here. So for the choir to sit down on these benches, they pull the seat down, right? And then when they get up, it's like theater seating. When they get up and put the seat up, that's what's carved underneath is the Misericords. So this has been a really fun guidebook. It has 10, oh, there's a ticket to the cathedral from sometime, 2015. That's when I went with my daughter, Lindsay. But anyway, so yeah, those are a couple of guidebooks that I love and that I go back to over and over again and just kind of research and remember fun things. All right, number 4, Breakheart Pass. A romance novel or Western, bonus points for a romantic Western. Those are two genres I don't read. However, I did way back in the day when I was first married, like in my late teens, right around between like 18 and 20, 21-ish. I loved to read Jeanette Oke. And this is the series that starts with When Calls the Heart. And she has some other, like Love Comes Softly, whatever. She has a bunch of different books and series about women on the prairies, mostly, if not all, on the Canadian frontier. And in this one, I think she's like a city woman. She's a school teacher from Eastern Canada. She goes out to the Canadian frontier in the West and meets this mounted policeman. And they fall in love and get married, and then the stories after, the sequels, are about their life and their children and just the stuff they get up to. And I just loved these. I think they were really good for me at the time that I was reading them because it was a Christian romance. These are Christian stories, and so it was a Christian romance and a Christian marriage that just helped me to see marriage from a good perspective. I didn't really have models of Christian marriage in my life as a kid and a teen. And so to read those just kind of helped me to sort of, get another perspective on marriage, a healthier perspective, I think. And maybe they played a part in my own healthy marriage. I don't know, but I really do love those. I would definitely recommend them if those are genres that you are into. All right, number 5, Thomas the Tank Engine, a beloved children's book. I'm familiar with Thomas the Tank Engine, so me and the kids call him Thomas the Train, and I don't know if he's ever anywhere called Thomas the Train, but that's what we call him. But anyway, a beloved children's book would be Magic Elizabeth, which my copy is not buried, but like way back in the back of my bookshelf, and then there's books in front of it, and then there's a chair in front of it, and then it's just a whole thing to get it out. So there you go. So Magic Elizabeth is a book that I got from my mom. It's something that she had as a kid. It's just one of my favorite, most beloved books. I actually wanted to read that for middle grade March and completely forgot again that I wanted to do that. So maybe next year, or maybe I'll just pick it up. But basically tells the story of this young girl who she ends up having to go stay with her aunt for a little bit. Like her parents are on vacation, and the person who was babysitting her has some kind of family emergency. And so the woman takes this girl, Sally, to her Aunt Sarah's house. Aunt Sarah lives in a Victorian home, and she looks kind of old and witchy and sort of mean, and like someone who probably wouldn't get along good with little girls. So Sally, Aunt Sarah is really big on Sally having good manners and all the things. But shortly into this visit, Aunt Sarah does lighten up a little bit, and Sally starts to kind of figure out that maybe she's not quite so mean and witchy. But Aunt Sarah makes it known, I can't remember how, that there is a mystery in the house and some stuff up in the attic. And so when Aunt Sarah is occupied, Sally goes up to the attic. She discovers a trunk and a mirror, and when she looks in the mirror, she is transported in the past to the Victorian times, or Edwardian times, and a mystery is happening, and it's a really sweet story, super sweet. I love it. It's just, I can't ever get enough. I've read it so many times. I've read it to my girls, and it's just a really precious story. So I'm definitely due for a reread on that. All right, number 6, The Signalman, a ghost story or a horror novel. Now, I did read The Signalman this past December. It is a short ghost story by Charles Dickens. I don't know. It was okay. Like, I didn't hate it. But it wasn't awesome either. So, and I'm not into, like, actual horror ghost stories. But if you are, the scariest book I've ever read in my life is Away to Helen Comes by Mary Downing Hahn. That's probably the book that I've read the most in my life, too. Like 90,000 billion times since 3rd grade-ish, 4th grade. It's terrifying. It terrifies me to this day. The last time I read it was a couple of years ago, just to see if it would still scare me, and it did. So if you're into that thing, check out that book. Number 7, Strangers on a Train, a new book that you hope to read this year doesn't have to be published this year. So I'm really looking forward to reading Daughters of Egypt by Marie Benedict. It is, I looked it up and it actually comes out today. How crazy is that? But it is the story of the finding of King Tutankhamun's tomb, and like an ancient woman and a woman who helped actually find that tomb. Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm reading the synopsis on it. It says the discovery of King Tut was made by Lord Carnarvon of Highclere Castle, which is, you know, that book. You've probably seen that book, and it tells about that castle, and that's the castle where they did Downton Abbey. And then also was made by his associate archaeologist Howard Carter. What no one knows is that without the pioneering spirit of Lady Evelyn Herbert, which is Carnarvon's daughter, the tomb might never have been found. She was fascinated by the story of Hatshepsut, a woman who had to assume the guise of a man in order to rule Egypt. Although she brought peace and prosperity to Egypt, her male successors ruthlessly and thoroughly erased her name from history. So this is telling that historical story, two historical stories, it looks like. The Carnarvon's daughter in the, 20s was that? And then the lady. Hatshepsut. Anyway, sounds really good. And I really like Marie Benedict. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I actually might have to go get that. Okay. Then number 8, The Mystery of the Blue Train, a book with a color in the title or on the cover. So I didn't want to go through like my library trying to find a book with a color name in it. So I decided to look on my Goodreads and find the last book, the most recent book that I read with a color in the title. Okay, it took me 3 tries to find a book that I would actually maybe recommend to you. So apparently me and books with colors in the title are not a good match. So the first one, the most recent one that I read was The Scarlet Thread by Francine Rivers. I first read that like 25 years ago or something, like when it first came out. I remembered liking it. When I read it again last year, it was like a completely different story. I liked very little of it. In fact, I forced myself to read it because I needed it. I was doing Anne's Prairie Trail Challenge, and I needed, my Goodreads says, I forced myself to read this over the last 24 hours because I needed a book to fit the fiction part of the Prairie Trail Reading Challenge. Now that I've avoided dysentery, can I talk about how sick this story makes me? So anyway, I just hated it. I thought why am I talking about that book? Okay. It's just gross and a disservice to women. All right, now, King of the Golden River. That was the second one. King of the Golden River was a fairly underwhelming generic fairy tale. But after reminding myself about the author John Ruskin's personal life, I was like, oh, and so I had to get rid of the book. Like, I knew that stuff, but I had forgotten. Okay, so I can't recommend that one to you either. Okay, but the third most recent book that I have read with a color name in the title is this, Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo by Zora Neale Hurston. Now, this book I only gave 2 stars to, but it was really because of the editor and her commentary. The actual story that Zora Neale Hurston wrote is really just kind of an article. It could have been like an extended magazine article, really. She was doing several interviews of this guy, and he was the last person to be sold into slavery and to arrive at America. I can't remember if he actually was sold as a slave once he got here, but he was sold by his African tribesmen. He was sold to a slave buyer, but I think that once he got here, the plans were thwarted, because there was still slave trading happening after the war and they were supposedly freed. But I don't think that he actually had to experience slavery. I can't remember. So anyway, the reason why I have a kind of a lower Goodreads score is just because the editor of this book was just constantly sort of apologizing for Zora Neale Hurston and her thoughts and her views and her existence, and I didn't like that. But the actual article, the actual story about him was quite interesting and fun, and I love her as an author. She is the one who wrote Their Eyes Were Watching God, and I just really like her a lot, and so I did enjoy reading that. I just think that I would have enjoyed more if I just would have like pulled up her actual story online from some archive somewhere and read that. So all right, so that was a little rocky, but that tag is done. I'm going to tag some people down in the description box. So if you want to do this tag, feel free. If you want to get in on March on the Rails, we still got 6 days by the time you see this probably. And so get in and read something, even if it's just a short little thing, and participate, get your train reading in for the year. And if you didn't get tagged, but you're watching and want to do this tag, feel free to do so. Hope everybody's doing well. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Steam train whistle bumpity bump, choo choo, choo choo, off we go. Puffin' steam whistle blows, toot toot. We about to leave.